Hello, welcome to my speech on fashion, past and present. I will start my speech now. Fashion is on a never-ending cycle of change. Let's take a look back at how it has changed over the years. Whether you like it or not, fashion always recycles. Over the last 100 years, fashion has changed drastically, yet has always kept former trends going. Starting with old school trends dating back to the 50s, before being revived into a more contemporary style in this century. For men and women alike, fashion is linked to identity. You are what you wear. There are multiple ways to dress and style oneself, which can be inspired by the media, print, or something from the past. To be able to comprehend the current state of fashion, you have to know and appreciate the history of fashion over the years. Let's take a trip down memory lane and see how fashion has evolved over the years, from the biggest trendsetters to the most unforgettable. The 50s were a period of economic growth. After World War II, conformity and conservatism characterised social norms during this period. The conservative ideology in the United States of America, back then there was plenty of scope to rebel, which was prominent in fashion. It was a time of evolution for men as much as women. The most trendy items of clothing were blouses, shoulder pads, round collars for women, and high-waisted pants and ties for men. The majority of printed patterns were hand decorated with paint and beads, making them unique. The trend at the time was wearing hats. Women were inspired by Audrey Hepburn as her short hair hid underneath a small hat. On the flip side, men wore hats as an everyday thing. As seen in films at the time, men could be seen running in the streets with buttoned-up shirts, ties, high-waisted pants, and hats. In terms of accessories, a cigarette pack and its case were all anybody needed to be fashionable. Before smokers realised the drawbacks of smoking cigarettes, such as cancer, it was a trend for a whole generation. Smoking cigarettes was deemed to be cool. Everybody did it. The 60s was a prominent movement for counterculture and change in social norms in terms of clothes, drugs, sexuality, and education. People looked for independence, which they had to rebel socially and artistically. The most memorable events during this period were Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the murder of JFK, Richard Nixon's inauguration, and the Summer of Love in San Francisco, which prompted the hippie movement, which displayed opposition and freedom. Tie-dye became extremely popular. It could be found on headbands, shirts, pants, and shoes. Jeans were seen as inappropriate, meaning women wore skirts and flowy dresses. Men wore turtlenecks to rebel. They are regarded as quite conservative nowadays. The 70s was a period full of economic and progressive change. Women had more freedom and economic liberty. Presidents succumbed to scandals, and exploring space was more prominent than ever before. Clothes took inspiration from music and Hollywood films. The main musicians at the time being the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, which meant fashion remained in the hippie movement. Hair was getting bigger and the colours brighter. Checkered print pants and miniskirts were in everybody's wardrobe. Fur coats could also be seen on cooler days. Technology began to change society in the 80s with the release of the IBM personal computer. The first ever space shuttle lifted off and music went down another path with the development of music videos and synthesizers. The popular culture at the time was MTV, as it was when music videos were initially released. Some of the finest music videos from this era came from pop artists like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and prints. They could be found everywhere, with their style influencing a whole culture. At the start of this decade, fashion of the late 70s could be seen. By the end of the decade, heavy metal fashion was in. Noticeable clothing trends were shoulder pads, jean jackets, leather pants, and jumpsuits. The 90s consisted of movements like grunge and the rave scene, with hip hop spreading worldwide, influencing fashion choices among youth. Cable television and the World Wide Web were introduced. Popular culture considerably influenced fashion in the 90s. People were always taking in media thanks to the internet and kept up to date by watching bands like Nirvana and Green Day on MTV. Due to this influence, grunge started to become a fashion statement. An everyday habit would be ripped blue jeans and Doc Marten boots. The new millennium, in the 2000s, was influenced by the emergence of the internet. Communication peaked with smartphones, social networks, cameras, and other electronic devices. This current era consists of different subcultures, from hip hop wear, streetwear, to modern day fashion is seen on the streets. Fashion nowadays includes everybody. It is further proof of how fashion has evolved over the course of time. As we continue to grow as a society and economy, fashion evolves and changes with it. Hold on to everything that you own. It may well be the hottest fashion in the future. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my speech. Thank you.